Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me today for this episode of Demystifying Money. Today we're going to talk about different parts of the business, but focusing more on exiting the business, which is something that a lot of entrepreneurs don't think about for most of their business life cycle, because we're looking maybe a week ahead, a quarter ahead. But as a financial planner, sometimes I like people to look decades down the road, really thinking about what things could look like in the future. So I was excited to talk with Megan Kearney and Todd Enghauser today. They are the co-owners of Exit Factor, and they're in the Boston Metro West area, but they're helping people really think about their business a little bit differently. So I was excited to have them on to talk about today. So thank you so much, Megan and Todd, for joining.
Thanks for having us.
This episode of Demystifying Money with Misty Lynch is proudly sponsored by Soundview Financial Advisors. Visit www.soundviewfinancialadvisors.com to learn more.
I'd love to hear a little bit more from one of you about Exit Factor and when somebody might reach out to you for help when it comes to their business planning.
Yeah, so really there's multiple ways. I would say the first thing, the name in itself is exit. So people think about exit first off as selling your business, but there are also variations of even family transition. So someone that's looking to, a baby boomer, especially nowadays, looking to sell their business, but rather transition to their son or their daughter. So we help with that transition. And then lastly is really putting a operator into place and scaling back time. We've also started seeing the enter side of things, not just the exit, but the entering. So someone who just bought a business, how can we help them set them up for success and almost have a roadmap? So 10, 20 years down the line, their foundation is set and they don't have to think, oh no, what do I need to do now? But they've already had that path ahead of them.
That's great. And Todd, what made you get into this line of work? Can you tell me what kind of brought you to this path?
Yeah, so myself, got about 25 years of experience in M&A, and so almost my entire adult life have been either starting businesses, buying businesses, and then of course as that process goes, scaling and then eventually exiting. So it's also what my family has been a part of. So I grew up into it. So it's really my bloodline, I guess you could say. But so when I came across Exit Factor as an opportunity, because it is a franchise, we were really excited about that opportunity because it was providing value in that small business market and even lower mid market that didn't exist today. So we were eager to get in and help businesses. And I, wish myself I had this 10 years ago. I could have used it on my own businesses over the years.
Yeah. So on that topic, what are some things, a lot of business owners, they're not thinking about their exit strategy. And I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs. I was raised by one who loved what he did and he could never see himself ever retiring. I think he officially worked until like the day before he died. And so I think a lot of us have that mindset, like, how could we ever want to leave? We love it. But then you look at the numbers and there's about 10,000 baby boomers retiring every single day. Like there is a massive transfer as far as business. So what are some of the mistakes that business owners make if they don't think about their exit strategy until either they're forced to, or maybe they never think about it at all?
So what people need to understand is the process around exiting does take a little time. So it's not overnight. And if you're doing it properly, there's things that are definitely on the financial side, but ways to package your business for a proper exit. So this talks about accounting, but is also process and procedures, contracts, just making sure things are easily transferable and ready for that potential exit. This ultimately raises the value of your business and then packages it nicely to be sold. So we're seeing where businesses are selling faster, they're selling for a higher multiple if they're preparing properly for that exit. And that process generally takes somewhere between 1 and 3 years if you're doing it properly, and can take longer on bigger businesses or businesses with multiple facets within their business.
Megan, what are some of the ways that you approach the business owners when you're talking about increasing the value of their business in that way? What are some things that maybe people aren't thinking about as far as increasing the value or scaling, because they're just, maybe they're just thinking about maybe this year compared to last year? How do you help people identify some of those areas?
Yeah, I think a perfect example is the business owner themselves. They are a lot of the value of the business. So if they're wanting to sell the business in 3 years, they're like, oh, shoot, they've gotten to a point. I'm the value of the business. So what we try to help these business owners with is that could be putting an operator into place over those few years before their transition to exit. So when they get to that point, the operator could have some equity in the business and super excited to potentially take it over or just be running the business in itself. I think that's the main one, at least that comes to me.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think a lot of people do think that them and the business are inseparable. And I think in a lot of ways that's unfortunate because, a lot of times the business could continue and thrive if you were to step aside, and maybe that could help
For
a lot of
sure.
people and help your clients with continuity, anything like that. And it can become part of your identity for some business owners.
Yeah. And I think another part is just the marketing aspect. Like business owners are so, like even myself, like you're so honed in on what you're focusing on. You don't think about the bigger picture of it all. And for example, we could dissect into their marketing and see, okay, in their marketing piece, they're spending X amount of dollars on this one specific, area, and they're generating $0 in revenue. And people don't recognize that because they're so focused on this is what I've always done, this is what I'm doing, and just taking another kind of step back and recognizing and almost like a second set of eyes coming in and seeing how can we add value to that. So that's another one that comes to my mind automatically that we've seen.
Yeah, I think a lot of us don't have a second set of eyes necessarily when we're the owner or the CEO.
Yep.
And we could continue a lot of times to spend money in different areas that aren't giving us that return on investment just because we don't really know when it's time to, pull the plug on that and shift somewhere else. So I think it is important if you have somebody who's asking those questions, like, what is this part doing for you? How is this, and seeing what happens when it comes to the bottom line. So a lot of us like to try the new shiny thing and think that
Yep.
maybe this is going to be it or this will change things. And then there could be some things that are actually really, really effective that could put more attention to. So I think that's such an interesting way to look at it and so important. Especially with a lot of marketing and things like that are saying to business owners, Todd, that you have to show up. You're the business, you're who people are making deals with and wanting to work with. So it has to be your face, you. How can that help and harm businesses that are trying to scale and get to a bigger level?
Yeah, I think, it is often tough, especially in businesses where the business is named after an individual, right? And or businesses, we recently were talking to somebody, the business owner had owned that business for 40 years. So in this case, the recommendation is we're bringing somebody up with from within who knows the business, has been a face of the business as well, just not maybe not in the front. So it can harm a business in a way that it makes it hard to transfer because that likeness is that person. So I think over time you can make changes, direct your marketing a little bit, and just do things to not be so focused on that individual. And then test different things to see if are these relationships the way they are because it was that guy or that woman who controlled that relationship, and if not, how do we bring other people into that to just make sure that those, especially in a business been around a long time, a lot of times it is that person.
Mhm.
So, understanding how we can make those changes and still have some success in that business when it goes to transform over to another operator or another business owner.
Megan, is there any ego and emotion that's involved in your work when it comes to thinking about a business maybe continuing without you? How do you help business owners who maybe are thinking, yes, part of me wants to exit, part of me wants to either retire or do something different, and then the other part of it is thinking, oh, but everyone's going to want to leave and they're working with me. So how do you handle those feelings when they come up with your clients?
Yeah, there's definitely no ego. No, I'm just kidding. I think that's definitely a big part of it. It's not even ego, it's this is their baby. This is something that they've developed for so many years, and it's so crucial to them. And I think it's almost a realization, like Todd and I talk a lot about like legacy. Who do we want to leave our legacy for? What does that look like? And so I think automatically more it's like an educational moment, switching your thought to I'm leaving this business to I'm leaving this business to continue my legacy that I've been doing for the past 30 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. So I think for them, it's almost just recognizing that this is exciting. This is so amazing. You just built this great business and company that's profitable. Why don't we continue that? Whether that's to a family member or someone that's looking to take it over and have that legacy continue on. And I think for me, that's always what gets the business owners excited and interested because you see the love when they're talking about their business and wanting to keep it or wanting to know what to do. So I think it's mainly focused on that legacy part of it.
Do you ever see business owners that maybe hang around longer than they maybe should,
Oh,
and
all
how
the
that
time.
impacts the value of the business?
Yeah, I think I mean Todd, you should definitely speak on this. You've owned lots of businesses and I think have seen that
I
of
think
your own self.
what we've seen, what I think is most common is they don't realize they might be slowing things down. And some of that has to do with the fact that they've done things a certain way for a certain period of time, or maybe if it's an older owner, they're not up to date on some of the newer technologies or advancements and what they can do to speed things along. So a lot of times it's, they don't want to let go. And some of it is might be they're afraid of what they're going to do next or being bored. And that is one of the things we touch on. So as we're going through our exit process, we are having conversations about what day zero looks like once they've fully exited, whatever that exit means to them. So and then we try to engage with partners of ours to also help them into that next step transition.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece of it. I think that could be why a lot of people do feel conflicted about leaving or staying because they really, when I talk to people even who are leaving corporate careers, a lot of times they haven't spent too much time planning on day one or day 20 of retirement
Right.
after they get back from the cruise or whatever it is that they're planning to do. So I think it's such an important thing for people to start to visualize because usually the entrepreneurs and the CEOs, they're creative people or they're used to being very engaged. And so it can feel like a dramatic shift, almost like an empty nest when, when maybe the business baby is gone. I want to ask you about valuations because I think that sometimes we get a little bit confused about what is actually adding to the valuation of our business. Kind of like the way some people will make some home improvements and think, oh yeah, this, wallpaper I put up is going to add so much value and it doesn't. So what are the ways that you actually can look at certain things? What are some of the big ones that add a lot of value to the businesses that are up for sale?
So I think a big portion of it is financial on that side for sure. So from that respect, this is always one of the places we start. There are specific accounting practices that we can go by and look at that when most business owners, especially in smaller businesses, are really laser focused on saving as much taxes as possible. We can show where there's some evidence when we're thinking about exiting where that strategy needs to adjust a little. So it's not more about tax savings, but there may be ways you want to report it so it shows more value in that business that might increase the ultimate multiple of that sale. I think the other things we get into, there's a lot of process and procedure. So businesses have to be able to be transitioned over to somebody else. So we want to make sure that those processes are documented, can be followed, that they make sense. Contracts are another one. So this could be vendor agreements, maybe it's a lease agreement. We need to make sure those are transferable to other owners and that aren't going to get in the way at the time of the sale. And then ultimately, if we are, exiting doesn't have to mean selling, but if we are talking about a sell, we want to make sure that that business sells quickly if it can. So by packaging it up and making all these things come into play, and we know that they can be transitioned easily and people can understand and follow the directions easily, that's what makes it more attractive and it allows that business to sell faster.
What are
I
some of
think
the other ways that people exit besides a sale? Because some people might think that is the only path, but what are
sure.
some of the other ways you see it?
So, I mean, transitioning to other family members is
Mhm.
an example of exit. scaling back and maybe putting an operator so that you take more of a advisory role, I think is another opportunity. So that, that technically is an exit. So they might be not be selling that business, but maybe they're scaling back and then creating more of a residual income in retirement process, for lack of a better term, I think.
Yeah. No, I think those are really helpful things for people to think about. And I'm curious when you see other exits that have happened or maybe experiences with your own, what are some of the common pitfalls that you see or some of the mistakes that maybe people are making when it comes to exiting their business? I know it's hard for a lot of people to understand that they might not be in control of when they're unable to work anymore or when they have to stop working. But most people are not. Most of these decisions are made for you. So, what are some of the things that you've seen that people might, commonly have happen to them when they're in in this space?
I think
I
the
think
biggest mistake people are making is they're not starting early enough. So if whether I'm entering into a business or I think I might exit a business in 10 or even 20 years from now, exit should always be in mind, right? You should have some sort of thought as to what you think this process is for you down the line. So you can be doing things in your business strategy that prepares you for a great exit later on down the line. So I think starting early.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would also say documentation. I was just meeting with family transition the other week, and the father who's a baby boomer and the son who's a millennial. And during the conversation of discovery, it was interesting. The millennial was like, well, I don't really know if my father has fully documented everything. And in his mind, he's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I know what I'm doing. I know, all these different aspects of it. And so I think documentation is so key that gets honestly misconstrued or just through the pipeline of just being unorganized. And so during those transitions or even exits, people don't realize there's so much, legal documents or just documents within, the business itself. I mean, it's crazy all the different aspects that go into how to run a business.
Yeah. And I think I'm in a very regulated business. I did purchase a business from somebody who created it in 2010. So I think when I talk to other people, I had the most Goldilocks version of acquiring a practice that I've ever heard of. She was looking to retire. Her clients were asking, when are you going to retire? Because we're in the retirement space. We're helping people with their financial plans. And she didn't have a natural successor. No one in her family wanted it, and then the other person working here was not interested in the investment management side of it. And so I met her through my network, which was helpful. But what are some of the ways that you see people making connections if there is no natural next person in line to take over? That could potentially cause some anxiety. So, how do you help people connect with the right person to potentially take over their business if they're looking to exit, if they've always worked for themselves?
So this is a big challenge because a lot of businesses, they don't exit, right? They close their doors. So this is kind of why we're here. We're trying to help avoid some of that. And networking is a part of it, but I think having the right partnerships, getting in front of the right people. And so in our case, we have a network full of advisors, business brokers, we even have interest from private equity if that's a route people want to take. So I think that exposure and exposing in different ways, I think through networking and advertising, that kind of stuff is what helps. But to your point, there are a lot of businesses that are just shutting down and closing the doors because there is no succession and because there is unknown interest or just the fact that nobody knows that that business is ready to sell.
Yeah, I think in my space, there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions with financial advisory practices, but I've been in rooms where it's like, all right, who's looking to buy a business? And a million hands go up. And then who wants to sell? And there's like three people that are like, okay, like,
Yep.
wow. And it's kind of mind blowing. But I will say one thing about the transition that I had, when someone works for themselves for over a decade, you're right, there's not usually a lot of policies and procedures in place. It's all right here.
Yeah.
And so, how do you help them? Is there any tools or technology or any things that you've found to be helpful as far as getting those things out in the least painful way possible for people who are like, "Oh my God, this sounds like a lot of work."
Yeah, it's mostly an interview process, right? So we have some proprietary tools that we use, but also we're engaging with some third-party technology where we're doing some interviews and trying to extract that information out so we can help create that documentation. So whether these are visuals for like manuals, right? So maybe it's an operation manual, or
Mhm.
maybe it's just HR documentation, so things of that nature. So this could be a third party that we bring in to assist if it's maybe HR or accounting related. Otherwise, we would be doing a lot of interviews, trying to dragging that information out of the folks to do that.
Do you see any trends in the merger acquisition space? I know I'm seeing online a lot of people being like, how to get rich, buy a business. All these business owners are leaving. And you see these like, and I'm like, how does like, who's giving you the lending to buy a business in a field that you have zero experience? Like, are there any things that you're seeing where maybe people are thinking like, I want to buy a business, like tell me who's selling, and they're not maybe the right person? Or what trends are you seeing out there? And
Yeah. I would say, I mean, as a millennial myself and being a part of a mastermind group of other individuals who are looking at buying businesses, and then even just reading articles, there was an article recently that talked about 15% of millennials, which I know is low, but will own in their lifetime 3 to 5 businesses.
Mhm.
That's crazy. I mean, when you think about baby boomers today, they're owning one business for 30 years. So that is a huge trend as I'm seeing it with my friends who are transitioning to or who are taking over their family's business, or they're not taking over their family's business and they're looking at buying a business. I think a lot of it also has to do with people wanting to work with other people. So say there's a one other friend of mine is interested in buying a business, people are starting to partner together
Mhm.
and go in to businesses together. So you could have up to even 3 individuals running a singular business just based on being able to afford that business, run it properly, and also probably have their full-time job at the same time. So there's definitely a trend, I would say, with millennials and just in
Mhm.
general, people wanting to buy businesses that are out there.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a trend. And I'm wondering if we're owning 3 to 5 businesses, if it's success stories or if it's a little bit of trial and error, or maybe a combination of both. Todd, you've owned a few businesses. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so there is definitely a little trial and error that's happening, no question. But what I'm seeing probably in the last 5 years more and more of is stacking of businesses. So home services is a great example. So, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, but now I'm even seeing where they're stacking in pressure washing and in warmer states, pool cleaning
Mhm.
services, all within one group of companies. So that's a trend I'm seeing. And then yeah, some of this has been a little bit of trial and error and uh, getting through, but there's a lot of resources out there to help. And the other big trend I would say, and that's coming into play, is private equity. So private equity, which used to have very uh, strict rules, maybe higher thresholds for entering, are lowering those entry thresholds, and so they're acquiring some of these smaller businesses, which may not have been on the table a few years ago.
And
I
what do they
think
typically do with them? What is happening with those, if businesses seem to be getting kind of gobbled up from different, corporate, or other entities? What are you seeing there? Or is it just kind of somebody looking for a buyer and, you know, they might have the highest offer?
I think for them, a lot of times, especially on the private equity side, we're seeing where they're just creating larger market business by combining some of these
Hmm.
services. But we've seen both where they're buying and holding for short term and just trying to create, mesh businesses together to create a bigger portfolio. But we've also recognized that some of them are holding for long term, and their
Hmm.
goal is to hold for long term. So just creating that bigger value. Even on the financial side, we've seen where books of businesses are being bought out, and they're doing a stay and play where
Hmm.
they're keeping the owners in place for say 3 to 5 years, so that name of that business
Hmm.
can continue forward in that relationship. But then they're transitioning over to a salary. But then these larger firms are looking just to acquire that overall book of business so they can bring it together with with the other groups and
Yeah.
make a larger portfolio out of it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that in the financial services space. I definitely have people as soon as I took over the business being like, "Are you
You're
looking
probably
to
getting
sell?"
called every day.
Yeah. And so it's interesting, but sometimes I think about the transition that I experienced, and really we both kind of went into it not knowing very much, and we did get some help externally to try to value the business. But I do wonder sometimes if things were kept more organized or kind of planned out more, is this a good opportunity for buyers when maybe their seller hasn't done a lot of planning ahead? And is that something that you've talked to people about as far as, growing that valuation? Because if people don't know, then it could be kind of the wild, wild west out there as far
Yeah,
as
I
what
mean, look,
people are getting paid.
anybody who's buying a business wants a good deal. And
Mhm.
so for businesses who haven't prepared, they can find those good deals. But there's also risk with that because things aren't documented or
Mhm.
because things aren't done in a proper way, it can make transitioning very difficult. It can even result in loss of clients
Mhm.
or maybe a loss of a vendor in that transition process you didn't think of, or your lease going up by 30% and you didn't account for. So it is a double-edged sword a little bit where you can find good deals that haven't been prepared
Mhm.
properly, but then also that transition in risk goes up.
What are some early warning signs that a business might not be ready for a sale, and how can owners start to correct those?
Oh
Megan,
gosh.
you want, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm like, there's so many. I would say, I mean, it depends if they're the value of their business and they're like, oh, I want to sell. We can't, if they're looking to sell, they have to continue moving forward being the operator. And so a lot of it is where's the value of the business? Is there lots of mom and pop shops, the aunt or the uncle, someone is the bookkeeper. So finding ways to automate and get, an actual bookkeeping service in place of their aunt because that's not going to, it's not going to show value in the end. What about you, Todd?
Yeah, I mean, so we see some telltale signs would be um, if a business has been around for a while and maybe they're stagnant, right? So that their social media isn't updated, their websites are older. There's some signs like that. Megan mentioned maybe their bookkeeping's being done internally instead of professionally. So there's some things there that we can see that are signs that a business may not be ready.
Mhm. How important do you think, maybe there's a business and they're looking and they've done everything on their own? Is bookkeeping really one of the first places we look as far as where to hire a professional or have somebody come in when it comes to valuations?
Well, I think bookkeeping is definitely key just as it's like the baseline to everything in a company.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean if they're doing it internally they're doing it wrong.
Mhm.
But it is one of the places we take a first deep dive look only because this is where we can show a really quick turnaround in value. So by making some key strategic changes we can also acquire a lot of value right up front through the bookkeeping process.
From the lending side, or people who maybe are thinking about selling their business, someone thinking about buying their business, has the climate changed as far as the banking side or lending, as far as, what people might need to consider if maybe it is a little bit harder to get your hands on the money that you might need in order to make certain investments?
Yeah, I mean, things have tightened a little, I would say, just in general over the last couple years, but the funds are available.
Hmm.
A business that is generating good revenue, a business that has proper things in place for transition are attractive to banks. So they want to see what's nice about our process is as we go through and get a business ready, it really is almost like this is packaged up, ready to go.
Hmm.
And we know what SBA lenders are looking for. We know what private lenders are looking for and so we can tailor it to those things. And then they're getting not only an evaluation of that business uh, that is very close to a CPA certified evaluation, but then also a roadmap of what that looks like to potentially grow that business. And so not only do the buyers like that, but lenders know that say, okay, wow, well, this business is worth XYZ today but we know it can grow to this over the next 3 to 5 years. They see a lot of value in that and are more willing to lend in those scenarios as opposed to somebody that maybe not a proper business plan is written out or they don't know the history of that business or where that business can grow to.
Hmm.
And the opposite of that, even maybe it's a business that has met its peak,
Yeah.
right? And we think the outcome or the long-term outcome may be flat. So
Hmm.
those are important things to recognize.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, I think sometimes I've talked to people who, maybe they want to sell their business and they just think like, we talk to lenders, but they just don't see it. They don't see the value, the way that that person feels that it's there. So I think having that strategy or having somebody else come in and kind of know what the lenders are looking for can be incredibly valuable because they might be able to communicate it really well to you, where you can then translate into, okay, this is where we should head instead of, trying to find a buyer and make it happen on their own. It's definitely an interesting for people to think about at any stage of their business. Megan, if you're talking to somebody who's new into business and they're thinking like, I can't ever think about leaving because they equate it to like getting a prenup before you get married, and I don't want to even think about the time when we're not together. But what are some of the ways that you guys convince people or kind of show them the value of what you do and how it can help them through each step of the process and up to the ultimate exit, which most people should plan for anyway?
Yeah, I think it's not even we're trying to get them, oh, okay, start thinking about this, in 5 years. But really, I think what it is about is it's never too early, and it's never too early to prepare to set the foundation. Think about it as if you're building a house. What's the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to lay the foundation. So it's always important, whether you just bought a business, have a business, that you have a solid foundation, and especially one that you just started or just bought. You don't know what that foundation is about. So being able to really dig into that and pinpoint different pieces of this is where you're at today and this is where you can be or will be in 10, 20 years, I think is really important. So it's just recognizing the value add of having a strong foundation and knowing where you're going to go. Because great, you start a business or you have a business. Do you know what that end goal is? Typically they have an idea, but we really dive into the value piece of their business, the optimization, the record, the people, the processes, the transform. How are we going to grow the business? And then, of course, lastly, the exit. So it's not just focused on the exit, but it's all the holistic view of the business.
I think that sounds like taking care of your business in a way.
Yeah,
Really,
true.
understanding that, especially for people who maybe do acquire a business and maybe everything is a little bit unorganized and maybe you can either continue like we've always done, but I think for a lot of people they know the risk in that of doing things the way they've always been done. So I think it sounds like a really smart opportunity for people to engage with you at any level of their business, whether they're just starting and, maybe in the middle of it and things are going and they think they want to scale, or they're about to, maybe consider, what they want to do next. So how can
Yeah.
people reach out to you and learn more if they're interested in talking with you about their own business?
Yeah, they can reach out to us at our direct line is 781-442-9950, or they can shoot us an email at you can do at megan.kearney@exitfactor.com. And then our website is just exitfactor.com/Lexington.
Awesome. Thank you. Any final thoughts to add, Todd? Anything, if you had to tell everybody, business owners, one thing, what would you suggest that we all think about as we go
Yeah,
through our
I
career?
think for me, I wish I would have come across that exit factor years ago in some of my own businesses and exit. And to be fair, I also operate other businesses outside of this, and I'm engaging this into my own businesses
Mhm.
as well. So my advice is take a look at it, start early, think about whether where you want to be today and say 10 years from now. And if it's anything in between, definitely reach out to us. I think we can help.
Awesome. Well, it's always good to hear that you're eating your own cooking and you understand what the value
Yeah.
is and you do it yourself. But thank you both so much for joining. If you're a business owner and you're just, maybe you realize you haven't thought too much about the future, or maybe you're getting to that point where you're thinking about it, I think it's definitely worth consulting with somebody from the outside to bring a fresh set of eyes in, look at the business and help you get the most for it because you put your energy, your money, your time into this business. So it's certainly worth it for you to take care of it and make sure that you are getting the value out of it that you've put in. So thank you both so much for joining. And
Yeah,
if you're
thank
looking to do a financial plan because you want to figure out if it's time for you to be work optional, please head over to mistylynch.com. We can set up some time to chat with you about your own financial plan, or you can catch up on old episodes of the podcast. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll talk again next week. Don't forget to share with friends and family, and together let's demystify the world of money. Knowledge is the key to financial empowerment.